My name is Chelsea Youngbloth. I am a genetic counselor at the Banner Good Samaritan Medical Center. And the program I work with is affiliated with City of Hope. If you'd like, you can advance the slide for me. There should be. Here we go. And then if you could go one more. So I've been slated with the task of sort of the nitty-gritty genetics, which isn't always everybody's favorite topic, so bear with me. This is the picture that I always use to help explain what exactly are we talking about. And so I like it. I think it helps break everything down. So if you go to the far side, you'll see the picture of the cell. I'd say everybody's body is made up of millions of cells. Inside each cell, that's where the DNA is. And I think of that like the instruction manual for your body. If you think of your DNA like a book, it's really easy to remember how everything's broken down. So the DNA is the book, and then that chromosome would be like a chapter in that book, and then a gene would be like a sentence in that book. And the two genes, we've already talked about them quite a bit today, BRCA1 and BRCA2. It stands for breast cancer gene number 1 and breast cancer gene number 2. So they weren't even creative when they named them. But it's easy to remember. So what they are is it's a segment of the DNA where the body reads that segment of information. So it'll read the BRCA1 segment, and then it will make the BRCA1 protein. Same for BRCA2. Reads that gene, then makes that protein. And then we're getting kind of detailed here, but the important thing to remember is that protein, the BRCA1 protein and that BRCA2 protein, they're actually really helpful proteins. Their job is to go out into the body and actually help prevent cancer. So this is a very common misconception. You'll often hear people say, oh, I have the BRCA gene, or I have this gene. And really, we all have the BRCA1 gene, and we all have the BRCA2 gene. We actually have 2 copies of each of them. They're important, and their job is to help prevent cancer. So it's not a matter of having the gene, it's a matter of having a mistake or a mutation in that gene. So if you could go ahead one more slide for me. I like to show this picture. These are actually an image of an individual's chromosomes. I think they look a little bit like worms or caterpillars. So it amazes me from a conceptual standpoint that all the information your body needs to know how to grow and develop is scattered along the lengths of these chromosomes. And then they're all packaged inside a cell, which is the size of a piece of dust. So we're getting really sort of specific. The other reason I like the chromosomes is that you can very clearly see that all your information comes in pairs, which makes sense. You get half from mom, half from dad. You'd expect to have a set of information. And then the numbered pairs 1 through 22 contain the same sets of genes, whether you're male or female. That last pair down there, here I have an X and a Y because this is for a male, and then females would have 2 X chromosomes. If you'll just give me one click, show you where BRCA1 is located. It's on chromosome number 17. And the second click will show us BRCA2 on chromosome 13. So what that tells me, every person, male or female, has 2 copies of each gene. So 2 copies of BRCA1 and 2 copies of BRCA2. If you'll go ahead for me. This picture helps explain what causes cancer of any particular type. So if you think of your favorite type of cancer, I guess nobody really has a favorite, but today we're really talking about breast cancer. So if you think of all breast cancer, the majority will be caused by a sporadic or sort of random cause. I don't have a good explanation why those folks develop cancer. I know diet, lifestyle, exercise, and then just some unknown factors can all play a role in their chance to develop cancer. The next largest piece of the pie is what I call familial clustering. So that's where you have more cancer in one family than maybe another family, but there's still not a real definable pattern. There's not really one gene we can pick on and sort of map through the family. And so for that group, I sort of think about genes plus environment. So maybe there's a handful of genes that all work together with a moderate risk along with the environment. And so it's this combination we haven't figured out exactly quite yet, but the cancer risk seems to be higher in that family than maybe an average family. And then the smallest piece of the pie, that's the hereditary piece. And that's where BRCA1 and BRCA2 will play a role. And that's really where the cancer risk is the highest. And so I'll always tell families, this is what my job is to help families sort out where on this pie chart do I think you might fall, and what do we recommend as far as what can we do to try and help you screen for cancer or prevent it if we can. I try to put them into one of these groups. And then if you think about cancer risk, I would say that hereditary piece of the pie, that's the high risk group. That familial piece of the pie, that's a moderate risk group. And then the sporadic is what I'd call average. I don't even call it low, I call it average, because the chance of breast cancer, it's quite common. And so I don't want to say low, so we go with average. If you could go one more slide for me, there we go. This picture sort of breaks up of that hereditary component. What's the prevalence of BRCA1 and BRCA2 mutations? So BRCA1 is a bit more common than BRCA2. The interesting thing about this pie is that you'll also see that there's some rare genes that can cause breast cancer to run in the family. And then there's some component we just don't understand yet. So this is a very, we learn every day in genetics. And so we always have to leave room for some wiggle room for, geez, we just don't know yet. If you could go ahead for me. So I want to talk a little bit more about the genetic testing itself. There we go. So the most, I guess, complete type of testing is called sequencing, and that's actually where they go letter by letter through the DNA looking for mistakes. It's kind of like a spell check. And then there's also rearrangement testing, which would look for any extra or missing pieces of the DNA. Usually this is for the first person in the family. So all of us genetic counselors, we really work on the family. So what's going to be best for the family? So this one is for the very first person. They have to do a very thorough scan through the whole family. This costs about $4,000. And we can sometimes have difficulty interpreting these results. And I'm going to leave it at that because I believe Kathy's going to mention that one a little bit in more detail. So if you'll click one more time for me. The next type of testing is what we'd call single-site analysis. And this is for families where we already know there's something hereditary going on. We already know that which gene we're picking on, and we already know that exact location of that mistake or mutation. And so this is a very targeted type of test, and it's about $475. If you click one more time. And then the other type of testing we have is ancestry-based testing. And that's really dependent on what's common in that particular ethnic group or in that particular genetic makeup. The most common example we can see, particularly with BRCA1 and BRCA2, is Ashkenazi Jewish heritage. And so there's actually 3 mutations which are common among Ashkenazi families, and to test for all 3 of those is about $575. If you go ahead one more slide. So the question is, well, why does ancestry even matter? And I think this picture is actually kind of interesting, and it's called a founder effect. And so what happened hundreds of years ago was there was 3 individuals that had one of those mutations, and then whether through migration, immigration, or emigration, or who knows what type of life events happened, that population stayed kind of close together. And then as it sort of in present day, one of those mutations is just a lot more prevalent than in other populations because they kind of stuck together a little bit. And then if you go one more. So when we're talking about BRCA1 and BRCA2, these are the 3 what we would call Jewish founder mutations. There's 2 located in BRCA1, and then 1 is located in BRCA2. And you're going to get a lot more information about these particular genes and what they mean for families.